Hello and welcome to the Nick's Boots from Start to Finish podcast. My name is Shiler Mao. I am joined today by Matt Bressler. Matt, do you mind introducing yourself to the audience?
Well, thanks for everyone for tuning in. I am the VP of Sales and Operations for Wickett Craig in Kerwinsville, Pennsylvania. We are a 154-year-old veg tannery, literally in the middle of nowhere in central PA.
So, Matt, we started working together, I would say, like early spring of 2020. It's been going pretty well. We were fortunate enough to order our first full drum here in the last month and a half or so. So very much appreciate your flexibility with making your product available and helping us get that out to the broader footwear market. Do you mind giving like just a quick synopsis of the history of Wickett and Craig?
Wickett Craig, like I said, 154 years old. I've actually been here at Wickett Craig for 33 years. So as far as going back any farther than 33 years, I cannot, but I can elaborate on everything that I know has happened. So Wickett Craig was in Toronto, Canada for 123 years. And then in 1989, the city of Toronto thought it was going to get the 92 Olympic Games, and it expropriated a handful of companies from the city limits, pretty much said, we're taking your ground, you need to move. At that time, in my hometown of Kerwinsville, Pennsylvania, where we are now, there was an abandoned factory that used to be a cheese factory. It used to be a cheese plant. But matter of fact, it was the inventor of the individually wrapped slice at that time. So the plant was empty. This whole operation, the cheese plant operation, had moved to Wisconsin, where it should be. And this facility was empty. Well, being that we were 5 hours south of Toronto, and this town was already a tannery town. House Leather, which was a sole bend and shoulder tannery, had been in Kerwinsville for 100 years. So the whole operation moved from Toronto, Canada to Kerwinsville, Pennsylvania. In 89, had to build the facility. One good thing about building a fresh tannery is you no longer were dealing with an old building. We're dealing with a new building. We were allowed to do a lot of major upgrading as far as modernizing the project and the process. And then we actually started tanning in late 90 into 91 is when we actually first started tanning leather here. So.
Tell me what were some of the first uses, or maybe around that time, what markets were biggest for Wickett and Craig?
Well, one of the biggest reasons that Kerwinsville became the new hometown for Wickett and Craig was at that time Hartman Luggage, which was based in Lebanon, Tennessee, was our single biggest customer at that time. They were buying roughly 40% of what we made, sometimes even more, which is actually anybody looks at a business, analyzes a business, that's really not a good combination. Sure. But regardless, they were our single biggest customer, and they were based in Lebanon, Tennessee. So we were making what we called a belting leather. And belting leather was, of course, 100% veg tan, but it was used in the full luggage that Hartman Leather was making. And it aged and patinaed and did everything that a high-end leather good should. Then, of course, we were into the equestrian trade and, headstalls and halters and harness and all that good stuff, holsters, belts. And, one thing about a tanner this day and age, you can't be a one-trick pony. And we never have been, but we were very diverse all the time. But Hartman was our single biggest customer at that time.
Got it. So luggage and equestrian would be fair to say were some of your biggest customers back then?
Yes, sir. Absolutely.
Got it. Okay. Real quick, what about your history at Wickett and Craig? How did you get started? So you're kind of, just for the viewer, Matt may not say this, but Wickett is owned by a meat processing company, if that's okay to say, up in Canada. And, so there's ownership, but it's a few hours away. So Matt's really, the one who runs the show here. So why don't you tell a little bit about your story of how you came to be in that position?
Well, I definitely can't take all the credit here. I have a great crew, and if it wasn't for them, I mean, they make me look good a lot. So my story is pretty unique. Growing up, my father was a logger. And between summers, I ended up, kids get out of high school, or I got out of school in the summer. Everybody was happy. Yay, summer break. And I'm going, no, because I have to use a chainsaw. So it didn't take me very long to realize that, logging wasn't what I wanted to do. So I know that's going a long ways back. But between my junior and senior year of high school, I started working for a contractor. Well, while I was working for that contractor, when I got out of high school the next year, I went to school went to work for the contractor again. Well, lo and behold, working for the contractor led into fall when I actually started classes, and I was taking just a few classes at a time, paying for my own college, and we were working on a hardware store. Well, at that time, I was going to get laid off in the fall because I was the youngest guy on the crew. And the owner of the hardware store came and said, "Hey, when you get laid off, let me know." He said, "I'll give you a job." Because I just still needed to pay for college, still living at home, didn't have anything to worry about.
Sure.
So at that time, matter of fact, a company called Premier Finishing, who was working on building the Wickett Craig tannery after it had moved from Toronto to Curvensville, he was coming in to get supplies, and he offers me a job. So I went from the hardware store to going working for this guy. And lo and behold, the plant manager of Wickett Craig comes up to me one day while I'm dirty building, working on steel and whatever it was I needed to do. We were doing anything that they needed to get this facility ready for tanning, and offered me a position. And of course, I said, "Well, I'm going to college." And he says, "Well, I think I can work around that. I've been watching you work." So tells me to come up to his office at lunch and see him. So, of course, I'm filthy, dirty, and I sit down in his chair. He makes me sit down. I didn't want to sit down. I was filthy. And I'm like, and he goes, "Sit down." He gives me part of his sandwich, and he says, "Well, I've been watching you work." He says, "There's no problem there. I'll hire you, and I'll work around your schedule." And ever since then, I've made some opportunities. I've been given some opportunities, and now I'm the VP of Sales and Operations. So 33 years later, I started here as a laborer. Wouldn't change a thing about that. I've done 90% of the jobs here, probably most everything other than maintenance. So,
yeah. So you really worked your way up from the bottom. When you if you ever get a chance to get a tour here, you'll see, Matt's really an expert on almost every job, that's
I think I made
here.
$12,000 a year my first year.
Okay, well, that was a lot back. That was a lot back in the 50s,
Oh, 50s.
I'm just kidding. You know how to do almost everything here personally. So I imagine that's a
personally, I wouldn't want to do it anymore, but yeah, it's too hard for me. I'm old now, so.
Well, it comes for us all, and you're doing a great job. We've really enjoyed the partnership, and it's been wonderful to see it come to fruition. A moment about like veg tan leather for those of us who are not super familiar with the differences. So for in the leather world, there's really two main types of leather. There's vegetable tan leather, which is kind of like the original form of leather that was made before industrialization, and now there's more modern or more chemically intensive techniques like chrome tanned leather. Do you mind explaining maybe the difference between the two, and also why is veg tan a great choice these days?
Well, I think it has to go back to the original. Again, in like you touched on, is veg tan was the original, and chrome tanning, I believe it didn't come in until the early 1900s, and it was faster, quicker. In some ways, it is actually better. There are some uses of chrome tan leather that are actually better suited. But nothing ages in patinas like vegetable tan. Now, the big major differences there is actually the whole entire time of processing. It takes, our leather will spend 2 weeks in the tan yard alone. And we use mimosa and quebracho tree bark to cure the hides. Now, those two trees, the bark is rendered down. It is concentrated. It looks a lot like a cocoa.
Yeah.
One of them comes from South Africa. The other one actually comes from South America and Argentina. One is mimosa. The other is quebracho. I think I might have said that. But those are grown for the actual purpose of tannins. The wood is used in furniture, and the tree bark extract is rendered down and used for tanning leather. Back in the early 1900s, there was a blight. Every little town in the eastern part of the United States had a tannery in it, and the majority of that's all of it had to do with the fact that is how transportation was done between horse and buggies and horses, and farming was done. So the main thing was equestrian products, and everything was vegetable tan at that time. Now, that is still a big part of what we do, is we play and we sell into the equestrian trade, but a lot of things we've diversified out from then. It takes us 8 weeks to make a piece of leather. and then it should age in patina, and we will customize, and we listen to our customers, and just like we're doing with Nick's boots, we started with a vision, and we worked together to come up with a product that makes a superior piece of, I guess it's a story more than anything for your customer.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. You mentioned something to us on the tour about how you guys pit tan. That's maybe a little bit different than other pit tanning techniques out there. Can you speak to that?
well, that road goes right back to the fact that we had to relocate. So when we built this facility, you know, a lot of the tanners are old. We're 154 years old, but all the tanners back when I actually started in the industry were all old facilities. And when they call that pit tanning, the pits were actually down in the ground. Now, the problem with being in the ground is the temperature fluctuation from midwinter to midsummer can go 90 degrees difference. So what happens is, just like anything with physical properties, in order to get tannins to penetrate into the leather consistently, you need to keep a consistent temperature. So one of the things we got to do when we built the facility here is the pits are actually up off the ground, and we keep our tanning solution, or our what we call our bark. We keep that water and tannins at 90 degrees, 365 days a year. So in 14 days, we know that our leather is tanned. We don't need to cut into the middle of it. We do not have to take a piece out of it. It is not raw. And the other thing is you do not want to over tan, because tannins are very expensive, and it can actually jolly back and forth for a number two expense with labor. So you don't want to over tan, and you definitely do not want to under tan.
Yeah, it's something I've found interesting about the leather business or leather related businesses is the difference in seasons. And some, especially for drying. I know you experienced this here, but you know, in the summer, obviously the air's got a lot more moisture in it.
Mm-hmm.
And if, you know, not all of the leathers that we order are vacuum dried, which I would call a more maybe reliably mechanical experience. But those that are just kind of air dried can take significantly longer in the summer than maybe they would in that winter with the air being a little bit drier.
Yep. And we did address that. We ran into delays, especially midsummer, like you said, when, you know, in Pennsylvania, it's definitely not Florida, but it gets Florida-like in midsummer.
Oh, it was humid.
So
yeah.
very humid, 90-degree 90-degree weather with 90% humidity. So we were having a hard time hitting, customers' lead times with the inconsistencies in temperature and humidity. So where the office was in the cheese plant was originally the Wickett Craig office as well, but it's located in the upstairs of this 180,000 square foot facility, which is actually the warmest place within the facility. So we built an office on one side of the factory. We turned that into drying, and then we put a dehumidifier in that room that actually pulls midsummer. It'll pull 500, 600 gallons of water a day from that room.
Wow.
So that we could be more consistent with lead times. And, you know, that's the biggest thing with leather is everybody wants to use leather, but nobody wants to deal with the problems of leather. And if leather was easy, everyone would do it. And that's the biggest thing that you have to overcome. There are, there are things about leather that are not desirable. They don't come in square sheets. They are not yard goods. And everybody that starts to manufacture has a great idea of leather until they start working with it. And then they quickly understand that that's why there's only a select handful of companies in the world that truly do it well. So.
Yep. No, I'd say there's definitely less than 10 in the United States, and probably significantly less than that. Why don't you talk a little bit about, so the footwear industry is relatively new for you guys. Is that correct?
It is. Just to touch base on our ownership, in 2004, Wickett Craig was part of a corporation called Tanbridge. And at that time, the corporation owned two other tanneries, one in Edmonton, Canada, and one in Winnipeg, that were chrome tanneries. They also owned freeze-dried food facilities, a handful of those. At that time, unbeknownst to Wickett Craig, the whole corporation was going to go bankrupt. So at that time, there was a vertical merger by Bank Brothers, who is our hide supplier and owner from Toronto, Pennsylvania, and they had bought us. And I bring that up relevance because—
You mean Toronto, Ontario, right?
Okay, yeah, I'm sorry. So at that time, of course, we'd always wanted to be in the footwear industry and looking at being diverse. And with everything, you had better be diverse and you had better look outside the box because you can't continue to do the same thing over and over. especially in the changing times of now. So we were given a challenge by the owner to get ourselves in the footwear industry, and we had played with a couple big names from inside the industry, and they were more commodity type shoe manufacturers. And I won't lie to you, it was a pretty big disappointment for us. But it didn't take me long to figure out that we are a custom tannery. We do things in a certain way, unlike the big box so-called tanneries.
Matt,
And
why did you have trouble working with some of these? So we won't obviously name names,
yeah,
but they're brands you guys would know.
yeah,
You know,
what happens with the relationship that you have, and it's all about building relationships. Wickett Craig, it takes us 8 weeks to make a piece of leather. So unless a company understands what our leather is, wants to talk about what it is, tell the story with us, for us, and we get that partnership established, then it doesn't tend to work. We're not a commodity tannery, and there are commodity tanneries out there, and those shoe manufacturers, footwear manufacturers, we're used to working with commodity tanneries, and that is definitely not what we are. We're about building relationships and building a piece of leather that our customers' product to make it superior. And it didn't work. It just did not work. So anyway, being challenged to get into the footwear industry, and I think we had reached out to Nick several times, which I had over the years, I'd solicited a handful of different shoe companies, but until a company realizes, like Nick's did, that they also need to look outside the box. And then Nathan and I started talking one day. I don't even know who started that relationship, him or I. We've been so far back and forth. And, it took us a year. It took us a year to sample and prove how well this leather would work. And then, of course, they have to go through the test of time. And that all comes right down to Nick's putting the time and effort in those boots to make sure that leather's going to hold up. And the rest is kind of history. No, we're not done. We're going to do some pretty neat things,
That's right. That's right.
So,
yeah, no, that was right when I got started. So March, April 2020. And I remember Nathan, our brand manager, had a pair of your boots for about 6 to 7 months or so by then. And, it was our first time working with Veg Tan, at least from this tannery. And we really wanted to make sure they held up, and they were looking great. I think there's some misconceptions. There had been some misconceptions, at least with us, with Veg Tan, that maybe it wasn't as durable or it wasn't as suitable for footwear as Chrome Tan. And I think each certainly has their place, and both can be fantastic materials for the boots that we're making. So, another thing that we've come out recently, and it's been a very successful product for us and hopefully for you, is the double stuff leather. Can you talk about what the difference is between that and maybe your bridles or your harnesses?
absolutely. And just to touch base a little bit on the Veg Tan, and you're right, there's a lot of misconceptions about veg, and we hear this pretty much on a daily basis. Is you'll get a customer call up, and this is probably the same avenue that maybe Nick's thought of at first, is when people call up and said, "Hey, I want to buy a piece of Veg Tan leather," and what they are talking about is a natural carving, skirting type leather with no tops, that will actually mold,
Like a
pull,
midsole.
stamp, and things like that. But Veg Tan is so much bigger than that. If some of the people would see our leather, they never think it's vegetable tan leather because it is misunderstood. But getting back to the double stuff leather, this is a leather that we had played with the equestrian trade a little bit. And then actually after Nathan and I really got to know each other for quite some time, it's funny because I will just send swatches, send sides, because you don't know where the best new thing is coming from.
Sure.
And it's some of that solicitation back and forth, and I remember sending a piece to Nathan, and he calls up and he's like, "I think you got something here." And I think that was his exact words, that we're excited about this piece of leather. So going back to that, our traditional harness is stuffed one time. And when we talk about stuffing, we make up a cauldron of oils, waxes, and tallows, kind of our own witch's brew. And then the sides of leather go into a hot drum, and then this is pumped into there, and it tumbles until it is impregnated with those oils and waxes that we put in there. Now that is called hot stuffing. Now hot stuffing is one part of the actual double stuff. So at that point, the double stuff leather will actually go through the rest of our setup machines. It'll go to dry, and then once it comes down, the double stuff is then dipped in a hot cauldron of oils, waxes, and tallows. So it is actually impregnated with oils and waxes 2 times.
Yep.
Once when it is wet, and then once again once it is dry. And, you know, I've been here 33 years. I have a lot of different leather goods made out of Wickett and Craig leather. And the double stuff is probably, if I had to pick one leather to be out in the elements that is ours, that would be the one. Because it is so heavily impregnated, and it is absolutely gorgeous on top of that.
It is gorgeous.
Nick sent me a pair of boots that,
here,
I don't know, how long have I had those? You know?
Matt, do you mind making sure those are in frame?
But I've had these for how long, Nathan? Tell me.
Year and a half.
Yeah.
Out there, and probably 3 years.
Yeah, I'm thinking, and I have yet to wear them somewhere because I show them off every chance I get. So it took me a year to wear the bridal leather boots that you sent, not because I didn't love them, because I just loved them too much. And then when these double stuffed boots came out, I think everyone here in our facility has handled them more than once and sit here in droves over them. So,
well, you're also using them as the match sample too, right?
Yeah, absolutely. We actually use them as a master swatch. It's funny because when we're making this, anytime we think that we're close, we revert back to these boots as the master swatch as well. So, but we may have to get a real master swatch because I don't know how much longer I can keep from wearing them. So,
well, they look great, and hope to see them on your feet here soon. So I did want to talk about something that we've got upcoming with you, which is the H Latigo, which we'll be selling in our footwear assortment here in the next few months. You know, my understanding is that it's kind of a hybridized approach. It's between kind of harness and bridle. Is that correct?
There's a market segment. Any of you that know our leather, you'll notice that the hot stuffed traditional harness leather is very sensitive, because we drum dye it to a color. We take it through the hot stuffing phase. And then once it's dry, we use a glazing jack to bring the luster to the top, which there's no barrier between the elements and the actual grain itself. And what I mean by that, even when you scratch it, you take your fingernail and you scratch it, even though you can rub that right back out with your thumb, it is very sensitive.
Yep.
So there was a whole market in between the bridal leather, which has a full finish on it, where it has an aniline dye on it. It's got a sealer and then a wax on the grain. And the traditional harness, there were so many people saying that they wanted something in between. So the H Latigo, and for those who are out there, that there's a lot of chrome tan Latigo on the markets. This is one right back to the beginning. Wickett Craig is 100% veg tan. So this is not a chrome Latigo. It is still 100% veg tan. A lot of misconceptions about one tannery's Latigo looks like another tannery's harness. Which
I
looks like another
don't
bridle.
know if there is a true definition of Latigo out there. I'm serious.
I don't know there's a true definition of anybody's bridle, harness, or Latigo. The only thing that's truly defined, it seems like in the leather business, in the veg leather business, is your carving or skirting type leathers, because that character is pretty much all the same. It has to be able to take water, has to tool, has to hold shape, and has to stamp when it's wet. Now, everything else is kind of a crapshoot. But our H Latigo is hot stuff, just like the harness leather. Okay. And then it has a finish puller on it, a lot like our bridle. So it's going to meet that need of both market segments. And it is intended for anyone to gravitate towards and try out a new product, especially if they don't find a real home with the bridle or the harness, or they want something in between to also go with their lineup. So I think that's a good choice. We're excited to see a pair of these.
I will summarize it. The way we are kind of looking at it is it's got the visual interest, the naturalness of the harness, with maybe some more of the protection or durability of the bridle. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah, it is. It's a hybrid. There's no doubt about it. And the one thing about we feel that if it can be made out of veg leather, Wickett Craig can make it. So the main thing with us is communication, and anything that if people reach out to us and say, here's what we would like to see. And not only, even if it's someone else's leather, we don't knock someone else's leather off. We try to knock it off and make it better if that's the case. Sure. But this is one of those things that we saw a need, and I think it will, I've no doubt in my mind it's going to make an awesome pair of shoes as well. So,
yeah, I want to circle back a little bit, and I don't want to belabor this, but the Latigo question, comes up a lot in our world. I think if you look online, I've seen a lot of when we were first getting into this, a lot of the definitions, Latigo is like both veg tanned and chrome tanned, or some sort of leather that is designed to have maybe the benefits or the speed of a chrome tanning process with also some of the visual interest of a veg tanning process, which I think is fair to say at like, you know, maybe a Horween would probably be where you might make a fair statement that that's the case. You obviously make a Latigo. I don't think there's a true, like, there's no like international leather board that's saying like, here's what a Latigo is and isn't. But could you just very quickly, what does a Latigo mean to you here at Wickett?
Well, and you're absolutely right. And probably the biggest play on words that I've seen in the leather business over the last 30 years is when people talk about a retan Latigo. And the reason that retan word comes up is a retan Latigo is not made by us. We make 100% veg, is chrome tan. And then during the process after that, generally in the coloring process, they will add tree bark extract of some sort, mimosa, quebracho, chestnut, whatever it may be. And it actually is again tanned and adds some of the vegetable tanning with it. And that is where the big misconception comes in is some tanners, and I won't name any names, will say, well, this isn't 100% chrome. It's got some veg in it too. But it's just kind of a play on words. Generally, it's cheaper. It's not necessarily an inferior piece of leather, but it's also made very, very quickly, unlike a full veg leather. So that has got to be that's kind of has always been on my radar, especially when I have a customer call up and say they can buy a veg leather, cheaper, and I'll say, is it full veg? And they'll say, well, it's a retan, and that's not a true comparison, not at all.
That's a good segue, Matt. You are one of, I don't know if there are any left, tanneries that do all of their own bluing from rawhide. Some tanneries are out there, they blue a portion of their finished product, but you do all of it. Can you talk about if that confers any differences, advantages to your leather and your finished product?
It's definitely a more difficult process, without a doubt. When you start from the raw hide with the hair on, you have to deal with all that. And we have wastewater. We have our own wastewater treatment plant on site. So when you talk about dehairing, it is very labor and also it's very raw material extensive process to do. So we use sodium hydrosulfide and lime and some other chemicals to dissolve the hair off of the hide. And a lot of tanners will outsource that because it is such labor intensive. But not us. We do it all here on site. The water that we use after it's cleaned and it went through our wastewater treatment plant goes to the West Branch of the Susquehanna River. So we are checked by DEP, EPA, whatever it may be, and we should. We owe it to the environment. We owe it to the future generations to put good clean water back into the local river. And then the solids that come out of our wastewater treatment plant are used in the local farm fields as fertilizer. When you actually see it and you see it in a pile, it actually looks like a pile of manure, and they actually spread it in manure spreaders, and it works wonderfully on the local crop fields. I actually spend a lot of times in the woods, and I do some hunting right on the properties that they spread this on. Soybeans and corn are the two most popular, but we take pride in doing the whole entire process right from the beginning to the end right here in Carvinsville.
I should mention that every tannery I've been to has their own water filtration process. It's very, very tightly regulated here in the United States, but Wickett is the only one that I've seen that basically dehairs all of their own hides. Many of them are done in facilities that are maybe adjacent to the meat packing facilities, and they come in already blued. We'll try and get some pictures up to kind of give you an idea of what we mean by that. So I'm getting close to the end here, Matt, and I really appreciate your time. I did want to talk a little bit about tool belts. We've recently started ordering your Wickett double stuffed tool belt. I know you guys have a pretty substantial belt business. Can you talk about maybe just some pros and cons of your product as it used in the belt business?
Well, and it's going right back to, and you never want to rely on your past, but going historically, we have sold into the tool belt and also the lineman belt type of industry for as long as I've been here. Since the day we've been here, we've been selling into those type of industries. And it's important that not only are those leathers cosmetic, but they also need to be strong. Even though a lot of them are lined and, they have nylon liners or what have you, all those need to be tough and needs to be strong. And of course, today you are in our laboratory.
Yep.
And not only do we do the break force on all of our leathers, even to this day, even though a lot of it's used for small leather goods and it'll never get tested the way it does, we still do all of our own testing here. So we do the break force, we do the elongation, and we also make a beautiful aesthetic piece of leather.
Sure.
It is
beautiful.
We are not at all perfect, but we strive every day. And I can't stress enough about the team that I have here and how involved that we all want to be with our customers to build those relationships, to continue to make an awesome piece of leather for another 154 years.
Yep. So just to wrap things up, you showed us some gray leather, which is a new colorway for you guys. So we'll be offering some boots in that colorway that you guys can see and purchase. I think it's a really unique approach to veg tan and just kind of the palette that you typically see in our footwear and what else is normally out there. Are there any other things that you're working on that you're excited to see come to fruition here in 2023?
One of the main things, of course, is continuing to do the existing leathers well, doing them right. But we also do need to continually look to get outside the box. Other than the gray leather, we are playing with a natural English bridle. So any of you are familiar with our English bridles, we make 7 different colors in the English bridle. And we've been requested to make a lighter colored one. So our lightest color up till this point has been a tan English bridle, which is kind of, lack of a better term, like a London tan. This one will be a true natural. It's going to be lighter than our tan English bridle.
That's exciting. Okay.
They will also fit some niches, anything from the equestrian trade to small leather goods. I think it'll do well. It actually dips very well. When I talk about that, I'm talking about like a show harness color. And we like to make leathers that we can spin off into our other lines.
Sure.
So you start with a base, and once you add oils, it does this. And if you make it drier, it does this. So because of the fact that there's so many different markets that we play in, the main thing with us is knowing what our customers are making with it is the communication, so that we can make sure that the intended product, our leather doesn't leave them down, when they go to make that intended product. So yeah, it's exciting. And the main thing with us is we like to get outside the box. And historically, like you mentioned, I've been here for 33 years, but anytime we do something different, whether it turns out to be part of someone's product line or whether it doesn't, we get excited and we get to do something different because it adds to our arsenal. And you'd be amazed, this gray leather that we're reintroducing, we actually made a gray very similar to that 10 years ago for a single customer. And then, of course, once you start playing around with it, you start hearing that customers and manufacturers want to see something like that, then we revisit those types of things. So you can never have enough bullets in your holster.
No, absolutely not. Thank you so much for the time, Matt. I also wanted to thank you for this lovely coat, which I know you award to your favorite customer of each year, and I'll be sure to bring this back so that you can give it to the next guy.
You got to be careful; they're going to throw you in the dehairing drum back there. So
we don't need to get into what would happen if that actually did happen, but I'll try and stay away from that and make sure I'm roped in.
The pleasure is all ours. We enjoy building relationships just as much as we enjoy making good leather. So,
all right, Matt. Thanks for having us.
Oh, you're very welcome. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. See you next time.